The ceiling of the fortress groans, raining stone and ash onto a blood-soaked floor. A military commander lies crushed in the rubble, his life bleeding out into the dirt. Beside him is a young girl. She is not crying. She is frantically biting into his uniform, trying to drag his dying body to safety with her teeth, because she has no arms left. They have been entirely obliterated by a grenade. She is a child soldier, a weapon of mass destruction forged only to follow his commands, and she refuses to let him die. But the commander gives her one final, impossible order. He looks into her desperate eyes, tells her to live, to be free, and speaks 3 words she has absolutely no capacity to understand. I love you. The fortress collapses. He is buried in the dark. She is dragged into the light, and the weapon is left without a master. To a human, those 3 words are a comfort. But to a machine built only for war, they are an encrypted code that will completely shatter her mind. How does a girl who only knows how to destroy learn what it means to feel? The answer is a quiet, devastating journey that begins not in the ashes of the battlefield, but in the suffocating silence of a hospital room. She wakes up in a pristine hospital bed, and her first instinct is to find her commanding officer. Violet Evergarden knows nothing of peace. She knows the deafening roar of artillery, the sharp scent of blood, and the rigid structure of military orders. But here, there is only the blinding white of clean sheets and an unbearable, suffocating silence. She has been in this facility for 120 days. She looks down at her body and finds her arms gone, replaced by heavy, intricate mechanical prosthetics. The loss of her flesh does not make her cry. She does not know how to cry. What completely shatters her foundation is the absence of her anchor, Major Gilbert Bougainvillea. Former military commander Claudia Hodgins arrives to bring her into the civilian world. He looks at this fragile, broken girl and tells her the war is over. Peace has prevailed. He tells her she is being discharged from the military. He explains that Gilbert has already made arrangements for her to be adopted by the wealthy Evergarden family. But Hodgins is hiding a terrible truth, refusing to tell her what actually happened to the Major. For Violet, being discharged is not a rescue, it is an erasure. She struggles to adjust to civilian life, treating a simple cup of tea at the Evergarden estate like a tactical mission. A weapon without a target has no reason to exist. Realizing she cannot survive in a traditional home, Hodgins brings her to the coastal city of Leiden, a bustling metropolis untouched by the destruction she helped cause, and offers her a position at his postal company. At the postal company, Violet is thrust into an alien world. She works as a standard postal worker, organizing letters and observing the flow of civilian life. But her eyes are drawn to a specific group of women working at typewriters. They are automemory dolls, professional ghostwriters who translate the messy, unspoken emotions of the public into beautifully crafted letters. One afternoon, Violet watches a doll compose a letter for an uneducated man who desperately wants to tell someone he loves them. The phrase strikes Violet like a physical blow. She remembers the last moments she spent with Major Gilbert in the ruins of an enemy stronghold. Right before the blast that took her arms, he looked at her, bleeding and broken, and said, I love you. To Violet, these words are an encrypted code. She has no framework for them. She does not understand what they mean, but she desperately wants to. She marches up to Hodgins and requests to join the ghostwriting department. She wants to become an auto-memory doll to decipher the Major's final command. Hodgins grants the request, partly out of guilt, and partly because he is impressed that the obedient soldier is finally making a choice for herself. Violet meets the veteran doll, Kathleen, and newcomers Erica and Iris. But placing a traumatized child soldier in charge of human empathy is a staggering challenge. Her mechanical fingers fly across the keys with flawless precision, but her words are entirely hollow. This becomes disastrously clear when she is asked to compose a love letter for a client, and she writes it with the blunt, tactical efficiency of a military report, angering both the sender and the receiver. Iris demands she be fired, but Erica, harboring her own deep insecurities about her worth as a doll, defends Violet. Hodgins allows her to stay, gifting her a new uniform and returning the emerald brooch Gilbert gave her, which Hodgins recovered from the black market. Violet clutches the brooch like a lifeline, but the real test is just beginning. To become a true doll, Violet is sent to an auto-memory doll training school. She meets a warm, patient girl named Luculia, and they are tasked with practicing their ghostwriting on each other. But instructor Rodand is ruthless. She fails Violet, explaining that letters are tools for articulating the soul, and Violet's blunt, factual reports are completely unacceptable. Violet is lost. Luculia, however, sees the quiet desperation in Violet's eyes. She takes Violet to the top of a towering bell tower overlooking the city. There, Luculia points out her brother in the streets below, stumbling and drunk. She explains that their parents died in the war, and her brother is drowning in survivor's guilt, feeling he failed to protect them. Luculia wants to tell him she is simply delighted he is alive and at home, but the emotions are too tangled. She cannot find the words. Violet listens. She does not analyze the situation with military logic. She simply absorbs the raw sorrow. Moved by Luculia's pain, Violet sits down and types a brief, concise letter. It contains no flowery prose. It simply delivers Luculia's deepest, purest thought. When the brother reads it, he breaks down in tears. Instructor Rodin sees the profound impact of this simple letter and allows Violet to graduate. Violet realizes that language holds a power far greater than any rifle. But this realization is accompanied by a terrifying shadow. If words can heal, What happens when she finally understands the magnitude of the pain she has caused? Violet begins taking field assignments, stepping out into a world she fought over but never understood. She is assigned to accompany Iris to her rural farming hometown of Aldine. Iris recently injured her hand and needs Violet to type for her, but the real challenge is not the typing. When they arrive, Iris is greeted by her parents, and the truth is immediately revealed. The ghostwriting request was a trap. Her mother issued the request simply to bring Iris home to celebrate her birthday, intending to use the massive party to find her a spouse. Iris is infuriated. She projects an image of urban success to mask her deep insecurities, and this rural matchmaking shatters her facade. She specifically orders Violet not to invite a man named Eamon Snow to the party, but Violet operates on literal instructions, failing to grasp the complicated web of social avoidance. She sends the invitation anyway. When Eamon arrives at the party, the atmosphere implodes. Iris flees to her room in tears, the entire event ruined. Violet follows her, utterly confused by the contradiction. Why banish someone if their absence causes pain, yet their presence causes tears? Iris, broken and vulnerable, confesses that Eamon was her childhood crush. She confessed her love to him years ago, and he rejected her. The unbearable pain of that rejection is what drove her to abandon her homeland and become a doll in the city. Violet listens to this outpouring of grief, and a profound realization washes over her. A confession of love requires a staggering amount of courage. It is not just a phrase, it is the offering of a vulnerable heart. She realizes that Gilbert's final words must have taken immense guts. Violet assists Iris in writing deeply apologetic letters to all the party guests and her parents. The letters are sincere, bridging the gap between Iris's city pride and her family's simple love. On the train ride back to Leiden, Iris looks out at the passing landscape and explains that her parents named her after the iris flowers that were in full bloom when she was born. Violet looks down at her lap, a memory flickering in her mind. She remembers a quiet moment during the war, standing in a field of vibrant purple flowers. Major Gilbert looked at her, a nameless weapon, and gave her the name Violet, promising she would grow to become a woman worthy of it. The assignments pull her deeper into the labyrinth of human connection, and the stakes grow monumentally higher. She is summoned to the kingdom of Drossel by the military. Her task is critical. She must write public love letters for the young Princess Charlotte, who is arranged to marry Prince Damien of the neighboring kingdom of Flugel. This is not a simple romance. Drossel and Flugel were previously bitter enemies in the war. The marriage is a delicate diplomatic maneuver designed to solidify a fragile peace agreement. The letters are published in the newspapers for both nations to read. Violet writes perfect, poetic letters for Charlotte, and Prince Damien's doll replies with equally perfect prose. But Charlotte is miserable. Charlotte confesses to Violet that she actually met Prince Damien years ago and fell in love with him because he treated her like a person, not a political pawn or a simple queen consort. But Damien's perfectly constructed letters show no real emotion. Charlotte is terrified she is marrying a man who feels nothing for her. Violet looks at the crying princess and sees a frightened girl trapped by duty. Violet makes a bold, unprecedented move. She secretly coordinates with Katla, who is ghostwriting for Prince Damien in Flugel. They strip away the poetry. They stop ghostwriting entirely. Violet instructs Charlotte to write her own messy, unpolished, passionate words. Damien responds with his own raw anger and affection. A heated, entirely public, deeply personal conversation erupts between the two royals, captivating the citizens of both kingdoms. The facade drops, and two lonely people find each other through the ink. The wedding goes forward, not as a political treaty, but as a genuine union. Violet returns to Leiden, her heart a little lighter, recognizing the warmth of true connection. Violet travels to the towering Shahar Observatory, an ancient facility isolated high in the mountains. She is joined by a number of other dolls, hired to assist the resident scholars in making copies of several decaying, rare books. Violet is partnered with a young scholar named Leon. Leon is a bitter, isolated young man who actively dislikes dolls and views women with deep suspicion. He has built a fortress of isolation around his heart. But as they work together, he is utterly astonished by Violet. Her typing speed is inhuman, her focus unbreakable. More importantly, she does not pry. She is completely unconcerned with his history or his status as an orphan. Slowly, Leon's icy exterior begins to thaw. He invites Violet to watch Ally's Comet, a celestial event that occurs only once every 200 years. Violet accepts. As they sit under the endless, starry sky, the silence between them stretches out, comfortable and profound. Leon opens up. He explains that his father was also a scholar at this observatory but vanished on a dangerous expedition. His mother, unable to bear the loss, left home to search for him and never returned. She abandoned Leon to the mountain, leaving him with a deep, festering hatred for the concept of love. Love, to Leon, is a disease that makes people abandon their children. Violet listens intently. She looks up at the stars and informs Leon that she has no known blood relations. She does not know where she comes from, but she is entirely committed to Major Gilbert. Leon looks at her and understands the absolute devotion in her eyes. He realizes she is bound by a love just as powerful as the one that took his mother. The next morning, Violet's work is done. As she prepares to leave, Leon stops her. He bids her farewell and declares that he will no longer hide in the observatory. He will begin touring the world to find his parents. He asks if he will ever see her again. Violet cannot promise, but the gentle smile she gives him proves that she is no longer an unfeeling machine. But the emotional lessons are about to reach a breaking point. Violet travels to the home of Oscar Webster, a famous and celebrated playwright, to help him write his next play. When she arrives, she finds a mansion buried in darkness and squalor. Oscar is a drunken recluse, his life entirely derailed by grief. Violet methodically cleans the house, forces Oscar to stop drinking, and forces him to sit at his desk. They begin writing. The play is about a magical girl named Olive, who uses her talents to call sprites to battle a beast, but in doing so, sacrifices her abilities and becomes separated from her home and her beloved father. It is a story of separation and longing. As they work, Violet discovers a delicate blue parasol hidden in the house. Oscar erupts into a furious rage, snatching it away. But the anger quickly melts into devastating sorrow. He breaks down and discloses to Violet that he based the character of Olive on his own daughter, Olivia, who died of a terminal sickness. He is writing the play to cope with the unbearable sadness of her death, but he cannot figure out the ending. He needs Olive to return to her father, but he cannot visualize the miracle. He mutters, lost in his tears, that he wishes he could see someone walk on water, just to know it is possible. Violet does not hesitate. She grabs the blue parasol, steps out the front door, and sprints toward the glistening lake near the house. She leaps into the air. The wind catches the parasol. For a few miraculous, impossible seconds, her boots lightly graze the surface of the water. She hangs suspended in the golden sunlight, defying gravity, bringing a dead girl's spirit back to life. Oscar watches from the shore, falls to his knees, and weeps. He accepts his daughter's death. He praises Violet, telling her she has saved him. But as Violet stands on the grass, looking at her mechanical hands, the miracle transforms into a nightmare. She just used her body to bring a father the illusion of his daughter. And suddenly, the walls in her mind collapse. The memories she has kept locked away flood her vision. The men she killed in the trenches. The soldiers she shot down in the mud. They had names. They had families. They had fathers like Oscar, and daughters like Olivia. She realizes, with crushing, suffocating horror, how many happy endings she has permanently erased from the world. A memory surfaces of Hodgins telling her she was burning. Now, standing by the water, the heat is absolute. The guilt ignites, consuming her from the inside out. She returns to Leiden, desperate for an anchor. She encounters Mrs. Evergarden, who accidentally mentions that Gilbert is dead. Violet's world stops. She confronts Hodgins, demanding the truth. He breaks. He reveals that after their final mission, the military searched the rubble. They could not find Gilbert's body, but they found his dog tags buried in the blood and ash. The army declared him killed in action. Violet goes completely numb. Denying reality, she departs the post office in sheer anguish. She travels to the military headquarters and confronts Diet Fried. He looks at her with cold, merciless eyes and confirms the death. Still trapped in denial, she travels to the Bougainvillea estate. She walks through the quiet graveyard and finds a tombstone with Gilbert's name carved into the stone. The anchor is gone. The world drops out from beneath her feet. Violet collapses in front of the grave. The memories she has suppressed finally consume her completely. She remembers the beginning. Diet Fried found her as a feral, nameless orphan and handed her to his brother, Gilbert, to be used as a tool. But Gilbert refused to treat her like a weapon, despite the military superiors forcing him to deploy her to the front lines due to her incredible, terrifying combat abilities. Gilbert tried to raise her as a human. He gave her a name. He taught her to read and write. He bought her the beautiful emerald brooch, looking at her with a profound, quiet sadness. The flashback shifts to the final assault. The sky is raining fire. Gilbert's unit is assigned to launch a massive attack on the enemy's headquarters, a suicide mission that could spell the end of the war. They suffer terrible, catastrophic casualties. They breach the headquarters, fighting room by room. Violet is a blur of motion, protecting Gilbert at all costs. They secure the signal room and notify the army to launch the final attack. But as Gilbert transmits the signal, an enemy soldier emerges from the shadows and shoots him. Violet watches his blood hit the floor, and a primal, horrifying scream rips from her throat. She tries to carry his wounded body to safety, but they are ambushed. A grenade is thrown. Violet throws her arms up to protect Gilbert, and the explosion obliterates both of her limbs. She is left bleeding on the floor, using her teeth to try and pull Gilbert's uniform. Gilbert looks at her, tears streaming down his dirt-stained face. He commands her to leave him. He commands her to live and to be free. And then, he speaks the words that have haunted her every waking moment. I love you. The opposing forces detonate the fortress. Gilbert shoves her to safety as the ceiling collapses, burying him under tons of stone. The flashback ends. Violet returns to the post office with Hodgins, but she is a completely broken shell. She refuses to perform any more ghostwriting. She locks herself in her dark room. The psychological weight of the lives she has taken, compounded by the loss of the only man who ever cared for her, is too much for a human mind to bear. She looks at her metal arms and sees only instruments of murder. In a moment of absolute despair, She attempts to take her own life, trying to strangle herself with her own mechanical hands. But the prosthetics refuse to execute the command. She cannot die. She is trapped in the hell of the living. Days pass. She helps an older postman named Roland deliver letters around the city, moving like a ghost. But one afternoon, she receives a letter addressed to her. It is from Erica and Iris. It is clumsy, simple, and entirely sincere, telling her they miss her and want her back. Violet reads the words, and a microscopic ember of light pierces the darkness. She realizes that the act of receiving a letter brings genuine joy. She cannot undo the lives she has taken, but she can continue to bridge the hearts of the living. She returns to work, taking her first step toward redemption by writing a letter for Spencer, Luculia's brother, fully embracing her role. She asks Hodgins if it is okay for someone like her, someone who burns with guilt, to live on. Hodgins tells her that what she did during the war cannot be undone. But the good she has done as a doll cannot be undone either. She is immediately dispatched on an assignment that will require every ounce of her newly discovered empathy. She travels to a beautiful country mansion where a wealthy but terminally ill mother, Clara Magnolia, lives with her 7-year-old daughter, and is prone to angry outbursts. She hates Violet, mistaking her for an actual, unfeeling doll due to her prosthetic arms, and resents the time Violet takes away from her dying mother. Violet is hired for 7 days to write a series of secret letters. The task is staggering. Clara is dictating letters to and for her 8th birthday, her 10th, her 18th, her wedding day. Violet sits in the sunlit parlor, typing out the architecture of a mother's eternal love. She knows Clara will be dead within weeks, and she is packaging a ghost to deliver across the boundaries of time. For 7 days, Violet maintains perfect, calm composure. When Anne breaks down in tears, terrified of her mother's illness, Violet gently comforts her, convincing her not to blame herself. Violet finishes the letters, leaves the estate, and Clara passes away shortly after. But as Anne grows up, every single year on her birthday, a letter from her mother arrives, guiding her through life, assuring her she is never alone. Violet returns to the CH Postal Company. She tells her coworkers about the 50 letters that will be delivered over the next half-century. And then, the composure she held onto for 7 days finally breaks. Violet Evergarden falls to the floor, covers her face with her metal hands, and uncontrollably, devastatingly sobs. She cries for the tragedy of a little girl having to live without her mother. She cries for the sheer, heartbreaking beauty of love. The machine is completely gone. She is entirely, beautifully human. The final crucible of her journey arrives with a desperate plea from the neighboring nation of Trigal. The country is tearing itself apart in a brutal civil war between warmongers and moderates. A doll request comes from a soldier fighting on the blood-soaked front lines. Hodgins absolutely declines the request, knowing it is suicide for a civilian to enter the war zone. But Violet overhears. She knows the terror of dying alone on a battlefield. She disobeys orders and heads to Trigal. She boards an airplane and drops by parachute directly into the freezing, mountainous war zone. She navigates the terrain with the silent, terrifying grace of the phantom she used to be. She finds the customer, Aiden Field. He is fighting for the moderate faction, but the enemy has destroyed his squad. Aiden is severely injured, bleeding out in the snow. He is dying, and he knows it. Violet kneels beside him, ignoring the artillery shells detonating in the distance. She pulls out her typewriter. Aiden, shivering and fading fast, asks her to compose 2 final letters. One to his parents, thanking them for raising him and asking for forgiveness, and one to his childhood friend, Maria, declaring his mutual love for her. Violet types rapidly, her metal fingers dancing over the keys as the snow falls around them. She consoles Aiden in his final moments, holding his hand as he hallucinates returning home to Maria. His eyes close, and his heart stops. Violet was built to kill soldiers like Aiden. Instead, she has become the guardian of his soul. She travels to his hometown and personally delivers the letters to his parents and Maria. They scream in devastating sadness, but they praise Violet for bringing his final words home. Violet bows her head and bursts into tears, apologizing repeatedly for failing to protect him, sharing in their absolute grief. But the echoes of war refuse to fade quietly. Diet Fried Bougainvillea is ordered to protect a special envoy heading to a conference to sign a historic peace treaty that will officially end the war between Leiden Shaflich and the Garderic Empire. However, a radical anti-peace rebel faction, commanded by General Merkulov, intends to ambush the envoy's train to disrupt the negotiations. Katlia and Benedict are aboard the train to assist the ambassador. Violet, returning from her mission in Trigal, spots the flames of a rebel camp near the tracks. Realizing the danger, she manages to board the moving train. The rebels launch their attack. Gunfire shatters the windows. The muscle memory engages. Violet intercepts the attackers, her mechanical arms deflecting blows with terrifying speed. But she makes a profound, unbreakable choice. She refuses to kill. She fights entirely defensively, disarming the rebels, taking brutal physical punishment so that no one else has to die. She is eventually overwhelmed and restrained. Diet Fried arrives and saves her, but the bitterness remains. He blames her for Gilbert's death, screaming that she has no reason to live. Violet looks at him with fierce, unwavering clarity. She tells him that Gilbert's final command was for her to live and be free, and she will honor that command with every breath she takes. A rebel suddenly fires a rifle grenade directly at Diet Fried. Violet does not hesitate. She throws her body in front of the blast, using her prosthetic arms to deflect the explosive projectile. The sheer force begins to tear her mechanical limbs apart. Even with one arm completely destroyed, she continues to protect Diet Fried. General Merkulov realizes he is losing and reveals a backup plan. The massive bridge ahead is rigged with explosives. As Merkulov jumps from the train, Violet and Benedict rush to the roof. Fighting against the wind and time, they desperately remove the explosives. In the final, agonizing moments, Violet sacrifices her remaining mechanical arm to rip the detonator away, saving the train as it crosses the gorge. The envoy arrives safely. The leaders of Leidenschaftlich and Garderic formally sign the peace deal. The war is officially, unequivocally over. Upon returning to Leiden, the city bursts into celebration. The famous air show is revived. Dozens of planes fly over the city, dropping thousands of beautifully written letters to rain down upon the citizens below. At the postal company, everyone is composing letters to be dropped from the sky. Katla gently recommends that Violet write a letter to Gilbert. Diet Fried, his hatred finally dissolved by her selflessness, invites Violet to meet Gilbert's mother. The elderly woman holds Violet close, telling her she is not to blame for her son's death. She tells Violet that Gilbert lives on in her heart, even if the memories bring terrible pain. Diet Fried walks Violet to the gate, observing the incredible, independent woman she has become, realizing that Gilbert's unselfish devotion truly saved her soul. Inspired, and finally at peace, Violet sits at her typewriter with a fresh pair of mechanical arms. She writes her letter to Gilbert. She tells him everything she has learned. She tells him about the people she has met, the tears she has shed, and the letters she has written. She tells him that she intends to continue living, carrying his memory with her into the future. And finally, she writes the words that started it all. She tells him that she now understands the words, "I love you," a little bit better. Through the ink on the page, she accepts his death, allowing him to rest. The next day, the sun shines brightly over Leiden. Violet Evergarden steps out into the city, dressed in her blue coat, her ribbon blowing in the wind. She walks up to a new client, bows gracefully, and introduces herself, ready to translate the next hidden emotion of the human heart. The weapon is gone. The auto-memory doll remains. And that is the journey of Violet Evergarden. A story that reminds us that no matter how deep the scars, the ability to understand and convey our emotions is what keeps us tethered to each other. It is a heartbreaking, beautiful testament to the power of words. But her journey does not end here. The movies released in 2022 hold even more profound, tear-jerking moments, testing the limits of everything she has learned. Do you want to see what happens when the past refuses to stay buried? Subscribe, and let's dive into the next chapter.